I have here a lot of water. I'm recording this for the 4th time for reasons. So water is an important part when you're brewing coffee because it's most of the coffee. Ideally, you want a certain proportion of particular minerals. And that's not going to necessarily exist where we live because our tap water is dependent on where we are locally for what minerals are available, as well as chlorine is added by municipal services to keep it from killing us. And our water is also going to, depending on how much pollution we have locally, contain, microplastics, PFOs, antidepressants. A lot of research has been done on the best water for brewing coffee, and the best water for brewing coffee was determined in a rigorous scientific method where they brewed coffee with water, the same coffee under stringent conditions over, and tasted them side by side and found the one that tastes the best. That's super cool. But that's not how we drink coffee in real life. So one day I came across a water pitcher that claims to produce 0 TDS water. And 0 TDS water is what's called distilled water. Sometimes I do things. This is kind of what led us here. I went on a thought journey from there, and that's led me here. So here's what happened. Okay, here's what happened. I started wondering how much difference I would taste brewing the same coffee with different waters. But obviously, when you do the same thing side by side, you're going to taste a difference, you're going to have a preference, you're going to have a favorite. But I don't drink, 6, 7, 8, 9 coffees at the same time. I just drink the one in the morning. So how much difference would I notice from day to day? And this is how we got here. I have my pitcher that I usually use. And this is the generic filter that I usually use in it. I also have a branded Brita filter that I'm brewing with. These things are open because I've already done this. Like I said, I'm filming this for the 4th time. So I have the Brita filter I would usually use with this. I have a branded Brita filter, and I have the generic, and I also have a generic filter, which is what I usually use in my coffee. This is distilled water, like purchased distilled water, that I put one of these packets of minerals. So if you've never heard of this, to get the perfect water for brewing coffee, people make these mineral packets. This one is tailored to lighter roasted coffees, which is the coffee that I'm using. And they make, different mineral packets tailored to different roast levels, different coffees to bring out the best in those. So I have, distilled water that when it was a gallon, I added a mineral packet to. And then I went to the bottled waters, for which I have Evian, because that's the fancy water in my mind. I haven't bought bottled water in many, many years. If this is not the cool fancy water anymore, I'm not hip to it. I have Voss because it's the really fancy water. You're not going to see any of the alkaline waters here because brewing coffee with alkaline water is just setting yourself up for failure. I have Poland Spring because that seems like the standard, you know, and then it took me a while to track this down, but everybody hates Dasani, so I had to see what happens with Dasani. And also, you know, obviously tap water, which in fairness, I live in New York City. We have really good tap water. Tap water in my building is a little less good. The pipes are very old. But tap water seems like it would be the control. So what I'm going to do in your future and in my past is brew coffee across several days with different waters and see how different they are, see if I notice anything. Usually I make my coffee with filtered water using a generic filter. I wonder if this is going to make me change my mind. And then I will have another sit down when everything is finished and give any final thoughts. Okay. This is gonna be an official Brita filter. I just brewed it, so it's definitely still very hot. It has a really nice texture. It has basically, I like this. This is the first one. This is not the baseline, because the real baseline would be the generic Brita filter. So I'm going to do the generic Brita filter tomorrow so I can compare the two. And if I have anything else to add, I will come back as it continues to cool. This is the generic filter. This is the second time I'm brewing it. I brewed one a little bit earlier. This is just in the interest of full disclosure, really, and transparency. There was some things during the brewing process that might have led to slight discrepancies, and overall the coffee not only didn't taste very good, but also was so different from the branded filter that I ended up deciding I would rather just rule out anything and brew it a second time. It smells nice. It smells kind of like European milk chocolate. If you've ever had the European style of milk chocolate where they definitely has a vanilla. First of all, I like it. It tastes good. I would even say I like it better than the branded one, whether it was the brewing that I was being more careful with after the first trial, or even just the fact that I usually use generic filters, so I'm going to be more used to it and familiarity. But I like it. I would even say I like it better. This is the mineral packet in distilled water that's supposed to be ideal for a light roasted coffee, which is what I have. So this should be the pinnacle. It's more of that smell from yesterday. I don't know how to put my finger on the chocolate that is chocolate. It's yeah, it's very vanilla. I'm gonna sip on this and come back. I'll say right now, it's not meeting my expectations. I'm gonna sip on this. I'm gonna come back because again, when you go with whatever. So I have some thoughts I think are worth sharing. Now that it's had some time to cool, I've had a bunch of time to taste it, and my expectations were definitely high to begin with because this is supposed to be the ideal water for a lighter roasted coffee. And I would say that the that vanilla-ness in the aroma, that was definitely higher than the filtered waters. It's definitely slightly sweeter than the filtered waters. So that was nice. I don't like it as much as the other coffees. I feel like the other coffees had this really nice texture that I'm still picking up in existence here. It's just not as present because there's kind of a dryness. It's like some of it turns into kind of a dryness. And I think that what's happening, I think so I think that in formulating water or formulating minerals for a lighter roasted coffee, I think the expectation is that the coffee is going to be more acidic. This particular coffee is fruity and sweet, but it's not especially acidic at all. I would say the acidity is pretty low. So I think that that's kind of taking away from it. And I also think that, the water that I got is stored in a plastic container and it's distilled water. So because it wants to pick up stuff, it's kind of leaching plastic flavors. And I don't taste it as I drink it, but when I let it just like sit and then take a sip, I'm kind of picking up a little bit of a plasticky flavor. In the initial, it's definitely present. So at least for this coffee, I don't think it would be worth it at all. And I think it might work better with distilled water if you can find distilled water in glass, I guess. Or, if you have reverse osmosis water, it might work better. This is Voss. I do like this. I find that it tastes different from the coffees made with filtered water. I like them both. I'm not sure that, given them like blindly side by side, I'm not sure that I would have a specific preference for one over the other. This is different though. The smell is a lot more savory and also more fruity rather than sweet as it's starting to cool down a little bit. And it definitely has a more pronounced acidity in the flavor. And I'll come back if I have any additional thoughts as it cools. This is Evian. And when it was brewing, it had this really, really thick foam that formed on the top, like much thicker than any other water. I don't know what that's from. Anyways. Smells like vanilla coffee. Like, okay, so it has a texture. That texture is really nice. But then once it actually has a chance to coat your mouth, if that makes sense. I don't know how useful that even is. It's this very cloying, it's unpleasant. It tastes like a bad extraction, except that I know that it's not. We're gonna sit with it. Well, the royal we are going to sit with this. So after I've had some time to think about it, sip on it, I think my final conclusion is that I don't care for this. So fancy water, not my cup of coffee. This is Dasani. I will say for it, it seemed to flow really fast. I don't know if that's whose fault that is. Spilling everywhere. I think I don't like it. But it's also too hot. Actually, it's fine. It doesn't taste like any of the other coffees. Dasani, hate on it all you want, but the coffee's alright. Right, okay. We're awake. This is Poland Spring. I don't know. It smells sad. Why does it smell sad? Is that the coffee? Or is that me? Okay, it has that vanilla flavor, but the vanilla flavor smells sad. And it's hot. Now that it's cool, it kind of tastes sad. It tastes okay. It tastes okay on its own. Had I not had this coffee brewed other ways, I would be like, okay, this is how it tastes. And I would be kind of fine with that. I wouldn't be super impressed with that. But having had it brewed other ways, I don't prefer it. And it's funny because just recently I had a conversation with a gentleman who told me that he uses specifically Poland Spring to make his coffee because he thought that's what he was supposed to use bottled water. And so, sir, if you ever see this, don't. This is tap water. We're back to having a nice smell. Kind of mild, but nice. I'm gonna let this cool. I feel like some of the water, I could taste things before it cooled down. It's cooled. I've been drinking it. It doesn't really have so much of that vanilla. Like it had a little bit of that vanilla aroma that's been through most of these brews initially. It doesn't have any of that left. It's got a little bit of like some of the fruitiness that I've tasted in other brews in the smell. I don't know how exactly to word this, but I feel like I taste the water more. It doesn't taste watery. I just feel like I taste the flavor of the tap water more, if that makes any kind of sense. This is Zero Water. Zero Water is the one who claims to be zero TDS or distilled water. So, that's true. This is going to taste really bad. It's very savory. I remember there was one that I brewed that I was like a little savory in the aroma. This is very savory. It's not great. Now that it's cooled, it smells kind of fruity. It doesn't taste great, especially it has an unpleasant aftertaste. It's not the worst coffee I've ever had by a long shot. Assuming this is distilled water, I didn't brew any coffee with the gallon of distilled water before I put any minerals in it, because that would have lessened the amount. But it's not as bad as I would have expected distilled water to taste used to brew coffee. So I don't know what that tells me, but not my favorite, not the worst. So what, if anything, was learned out of this experience? Using bottled water to brew your coffee is almost certainly a waste of money and resources. I did really like the Voss. The Voss was by far my favorite water that I used to brew any of these coffees. It does come in glass bottles, which at least isn't plastic, but it's still creating an incredible amount of pollution because that water has to be shipped from Norway. The water is bottled and shipped from Norway. So that's just running a whole plant, creating all of this, glass is heavy, so it's creating all of this excess fuel pollution. And it's really, in fairness, because of how much goes into it, but it's very expensive. I got this on sale, and I think it was like $3-something, and it'll brew, 1 cup of coffee. You'd have to get more just to brew a second one. Do filter your water. Definitely filter your water. The filtered water is leaps and bounds above what comes out of the tap, right? The tap water is like, this is okay. Filtered water, leaps and bounds above it. In terms of, do you need a branded filter? I think we all kind of know that most things that are generic, they're just as good. I think the filters are 100% the case where, at least the filters I get Target branded filters. I don't know what kind of filters are out there, but that's perfectly fine. As far as the mineral packets go, if you're gonna go the mineral packet route, I think that you're better off thinking about them less in terms of matching the minerals to the roast of coffee that you have the way that the website recommends, and more in terms of what you're looking for. Because what I found with so I have a mineral packet intended for light roast coffee. This is a light roast coffee. And I think what this mineral packet does is highlight acidity, but this is not a particularly acidic coffee. And that highlighted acidity, I didn't find that to be better than a different water. In fact, I liked it less. So I think that if you have an acidic coffee, but you're not going to know that until you brew it. But I think it's more in terms of what you're looking to highlight. So if you think about this in terms of like ranges, I would have to get the other mineral packets to really test this. But if you think of like the light roast as highlight, I think it's more like, okay, acid is like high notes, right? And like the deep chocolate is like, the caramelly is kind of like low notes. So if you think about, if you want to highlight the high notes, you would go light roast. And if you want to highlight like the base, you would go dark roast. So from that, I would think that something intended for a medium roast would actually be good for a range. I also think that, or I'm also confident that you can brew with a variety of waters, and what you just kind of end up doing, like I found that I really, really liked the water from, or the coffee that came out of the generic filter that I usually use. And my guess is that my recipe is already dialed into the water that I always use. So if I'm using a different water, the best bet to get the best out of it would be to start tweaking the recipe to find what works the best. I don't have enough coffee, frankly, time to do that for all of these waters. So I think that you could probably brew with a spectrum of waters and just dial into what works best for that. I would not recommend buying bottled water, especially water bottled in plastic. And I think definitely filter your water. And that's just kind of the conclusion that's pretty obvious before I started this. So there we go. We found nothing. I don't know if I'm going to post this. I might call this a bonus track. Because I can't pass up a bad idea. So this is the coffee I was using. And I don't know if you can see this, but it lists mango as one of the flavor notes. And as I was looking for water, I came across this mango flavored water. I would say scented water. The ingredients are just water and natural flavors, so I think it's mango scented, although I would say it's not really mango, it's more like very peachy pineapple, but that's a conversation about flavors. So I made coffee with it. It does kind of smell like the water. And I fully expected this to taste terrible. It doesn't taste terrible. It doesn't taste like the coffee was tasting before. That's for sure. I don't drink flavored coffees. I wonder what would happen if you put milk in this, but I don't have milk. I have condensed milk. It's like such a small amount. Maybe like that much. It's refusing to mix. The coffee rejects this concoction. I want to get it to a color that people who drink coffee milk. If that turns out to be too much, I mean, this is all already way too much. That's like a milky coffee color, right? Can you see that? I'm gonna have to clean the whole kitchen just out of this nonsense. This is disgusting. This is very bad. Brewing coffee with flavored water. This makes me want to go get a whole bunch of flavored waters and see what happens. It's a bad idea for another day.